Silver is up sharply over the past year, one of the best stretches it has had in a very long time. And if you own it right now, you are hearing the same chorus I am hearing. Take the profit. It is extended. It has run too far, too fast. Do not be greedy. It is bound to come back down. So here is the exact question this whole video is going to answer. The one sitting right there in the title. Is a big year like this the top? The moment a smart person quietly rings the register and walks away? Or is it one chapter of something much larger that is only just getting started? Because on the screen in front of you, those two readings look completely identical, and they lead to opposite decisions with the money you spent a lifetime building. Here is my promise to you. By the end of the next few minutes, you will know how to tell those two apart. Not with a price target. I do not deal in those. Something better than a target. You will know whether you are trading a spike or holding a trend, because they are not the same activity. And mistaking one for the other is exactly how careful savers get shaken out of the single best thing they ever bought. And there is one evening in American history that settles the whole argument. One night, decades ago, when the rules underneath every dollar you own were changed in about 15 minutes, and almost nobody watching understood what they had just witnessed. I am saving the heart of that story for the very end, because it is the part that tells you whether just getting started is a slogan somebody put on a thumbnail or a simple statement of fact. Stay with me and you will have it. Because to answer the question in that title honestly, you and I have to go back and stand in the room where the trend you are holding actually began. Not last year, not the year silver first crossed some round number. Go back with me to the summer of 1971, to a living room in middle America, and to an ordinary man sitting in front of a television set with his wife. He is a foreman at a tool and die shop, 51 years old, a mortgage nearly paid off, two kids grown and gone, a modest pile of savings in the bank that he has guarded like a man guards a garden. And on this particular Sunday evening, the President of the United States comes on every channel at once and tells the country something that sounds, to almost everyone listening, like dry financial housekeeping. He says the United States will no longer convert dollars into gold. For every day this foreman had been alive, a dollar was a paper claim you could, in principle, turn in for a fixed weight of gold. $35, 1 ounce. A fixed law of the universe, as steady as the length of a foot or the weight of a pound. And in the span of one short address, the president cuts that cord. He calls it temporary. He promises it is to protect the dollar. And then he moves on. The next morning, almost nobody at the shop mentions it. The men talk about the ballgame. But this foreman cannot let it go, because he has spent 30 years measuring steel to the thousandth of an inch, and he understands, deep in his bones, what it means when the thing you measure everything against is quietly taken away. He does the only math he trusts. He looks at what his paycheck buys at the grocery store this year versus 5 years back. He watches the gap. And he makes a decision that his brother-in-law will mock him for at Thanksgiving. He starts, quietly, putting a slice of his savings into gold and silver. Not all of it. A slice. Metal he can hold. Hold him there, in that living room. We are coming back to him. And the thing I promised you at the end is really his lesson, not mine. But first, I owe you an honest look at the other side. Because I did not make this video to sell you a feeling. I made it to help you make a real decision. So let me give the sell case its full due, the way an honest person has to, because it is not stupid, and I will not insult you by pretending it is. The people telling you to take profits are pointing at real things. Silver has just had a tremendous year. It has come screaming back above $60 an ounce after a brutal shakeout that knocked it down into the mid-50s, a fast, ugly flush that it clawed most of the way back from in a matter of days. It is stretched. It is emotional. Silver is, without any argument, the most violent major metal on Earth, a market that overshoots wildly on the way up and just as wildly on the way back down. The chart is a long way above where you could have bought it a couple of years ago, and there is a hawk sitting at the head of the Federal Reserve, Kevin Warsh, openly worried that prices are still too hot, with a rate hike on the table instead of a cut. Metal pays you no interest. When the man who sets the price of money is threatening to raise it, the cost of holding a lump of silver that just sits there goes up. And history says that pressure can absolutely drag the price back down. So the sell case, stated fairly, is this. You have a big gain in a violent asset against a hostile Fed. Book it. Be disciplined. You can always buy it back cheaper. That is a serious argument. If you have been thinking exactly that, you are not foolish. You are being careful, and careful is how you got $100,000 or more into a retirement account in the first place. But here is where I need you to look closer, because the entire sell case rests on one hidden assumption, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. The sell case assumes that this year is the move. It assumes the thing you are holding is a one-year event, a spike, a rubber band stretched too far that must snap back. Take the profit on the spike, wait for the snap, buy it back. That logic is airtight, if and only if what you own is a spike. And that is the exact question our foreman in 1971 can answer for you, because he lived the difference between a spike and a trend with his own money, in his own hands, across a whole decade. Here is what happened to him. He was right, completely, provably right, in a way that took years to reveal itself. That gold he bought, climbing out of the double digits, the metal his brother-in-law laughed at, went from $35 an ounce to over $800 an ounce across that decade. More than 20 times his money on the metal itself. But here's the part that matters for your decision today. It did not happen because of anything that occurred in 1971. The news that night was boring. It was housekeeping. What actually happened was that a dam broke, and the water did not come all at once. The cord between the dollar and gold was cut, and it was never, ever reattached. Temporary became permanent. And from that night forward, the dollar was free to be printed and borrowed against and stretched, with nothing physical standing behind it saying no. That is not a spike. That is an engine. And once it started running, it simply did not stop. Which brings us straight back to the title and to your decision. When you look at silver up sharply over the past year and ask, is this the top? You are asking the wrong question, or at least an incomplete one. The right question is, what is this a year of? Because if this is 1 year of a one-year event, then yes, take the profit. The sell case wins. But if this is 1 year of the same engine that started running the night that president cut the cord, an engine that has now been running for more than 50 years and has never once been switched off, then selling your position because it had a good year is like our foreman selling his gold in 1972 because it had already doubled. He would have congratulated himself on his discipline, and he would have missed everything. So how do you tell which one you are holding? This is the whole ballgame, and I promised you would be able to do it yourself, so here it is. A spike is a price event. It is caused by a temporary imbalance, a squeeze, a panic, a headline, and when the cause passes, the price comes back, because nothing underneath actually changed. A trend is a structural event. It is caused by something real shifting underneath the price, something that does not reverse when the mood does. And silver, right now, is sitting on top of the most structural set of facts it has had in modern history. Let me show you, quickly, because this is the part the people yelling "take profits" never put on the screen. Silver has run a physical deficit for 6 straight years. The world uses more of it than it digs up, year after year after year, and it has covered the gap by draining metal out of above-ground vaults, hundreds of millions of ounces pulled down to fill the hole. That is not a mood. That is not a squeeze. That is a structural shortage grinding along underneath the price, whether silver is having a good week or a bad one. And here is why it does not fix itself. Most silver is not even mined on purpose. It comes up as a byproduct of digging for copper and lead and zinc. So no one opens a mine because silver got expensive, and supply barely responds no matter what the price does. On the other side, a solar factory cannot redesign its panels overnight to use less of it, and the electronics in every device around you cannot swap it out on a whim. When neither supply nor demand can flex, there is only one thing in the whole equation left free to move, and that is the price. That is not the description of a spike. That is the description of a coiled spring. And I want to pause here, right at this point, because this is exactly the moment where a real decision quietly gets made, and it is the decision this channel exists for. If you are sitting on $100,000 or more in a 401k or an IRA in savings you spent a working life filling, then a setup like this one is precisely where the choice you make actually counts, and where the difference between owning something real and owning a paper promise on it turns out to be the entire ballgame. I put together a free retirement protection guide for exactly this reason. It walks through, in plain English, how a number of retirees are moving a portion of their savings into physical gold and silver without triggering taxes or penalties, held right inside the tax-advantaged account they already have. Real metal they own, rather than a digit on a screen that somebody else controls. If you are watching this on your television, just scan the QR code on your screen. If you are on your phone or your computer, go to jeffreedguide.com. And if you go through it and want to talk it over with a human being, there is a free, no obligation, one-on-one session for folks with $100,000 or more in a retirement account. No pressure, nothing to buy, just straight answers. All right, let me get back to it, because we are not done separating the spike from the trend. Now, here is the part that actually changes things, and almost nobody making these videos gets to it. So let me shift gears and be blunt with you. There is a buyer on the other side of this market that does not care even slightly about a good year or a bad week, and watching what they do is the single clearest way to tell a trend from a spike. China is draining physical silver. Its imports surged to a record. Its domestic inventories were drawn down hard enough that at the stress point, silver inside China traded at a premium to the price in London, which is the market's way of physically pulling metal toward the buyer. And they did not stop when the paper price flushed into the mid-50s. The people who trade silver on a screen flinched during that shakeout. The people who take delivery of actual metal did not. Think about what that tells you. A spike is when nervous money rushes in and then rushes out. This is the opposite. This is the most determined buyer on the planet quietly taking the metal off the table while the nervous money argues about whether to book its profit. When the folks who move the most physical silver in the world are acting like they expect it to get tighter, not looser, that is not the signature of a top. That is the signature of a trend that is, in the plainest possible sense, just getting started. So let me be fair and lay out where all of this points, because the title says just getting started, and I owe you the honest version of what that phrase means to the people who study this for a living, and where they might be wrong. There is a whole spectrum of the bull case, and I want you to see all of it clearly, including the parts I am skeptical of. The cleanest way analysts frame the upside is through the gold to silver ratio, which is simply how many ounces of silver it takes to buy 1 ounce of gold. During the shakeout, that ratio stretched up into the 70s, and it has since eased into the high 60s as silver outran gold on the way back, still historically wide. The argument is pure division, and you can run it yourself. Gold sits a bit above $4,000 now, at a multi-week high. If the ratio were to compress back toward levels it has actually visited in history, silver's implied price is just gold divided by that smaller number. Take the roughly 40-to-1 the ratio has traded at in calmer decades, and the arithmetic lands you around $100, low triple digits. Take the roughly 30-to-1 some structural bulls expect, and you are up near 130, 150. Go all the way to the compression scene at the 1980 peak, near 16 or 17-to-1. Apply it to today's gold, and the division spits out something in the neighborhood of 250, and the boldest bank bull cases push toward 300 if the deficit truly bites. Now, that is the case a growing number of analysts are making. It is real math on real mechanics. But I am not handing it to you as a prediction, and neither should they, because every one of those numbers assumes the ratio actually reverts, and a ratio can stay stretched for years, and gold has to cooperate. And a few days of silver leading gold on a bounce is not the reversion arriving. It is a relative value argument, not a promise and not a date. And I have to say the next part plainly, because you will run into it out there. There are voices at the far edge of this calling for $1,000 silver or $50,000 gold, some clean 30-fold moonshot. I will not pretend those come from the same honest place as the ratio math. They do not. Those numbers come from imagining a complete monetary reset, a dollar rebuilt from scratch on the gold sitting in vaults, and then stretching an old ratio across that reimagined world. It is a story about the end of the financial system, not about next year. The bigger the number, the more it is assumptions stacked on assumptions, and the more skepticism it has earned. I lay it out only so you understand the full spectrum, not because anyone alive can hand you that figure or a date it arrives. Which brings me back to the foreman in his living room, and to the number I promised you at the top, the one that matters more than any target. Here is the honest truth, and I want it to land because I cannot say it often enough. I cannot promise you a price, and I cannot promise you a date, and the very second anyone does either one, you should close their video and never open another. Silver is brutal. It overshoots insanely in both directions. You just watched it flush into the mid 50s and snap back above 60 in the span of days. And it can turn right around and do the ugly version just as fast. It could fall well below where it just broke out from before any of this case ever plays out. It could stay cheap for longer than you think you can stand. The deficit is real, but in the short run, the price does not answer to the deficit. In the short run, it answers to that hawk at the Fed, to the dollar, to fear, to whatever the paper market feels like doing on a given morning. The shortage is the trend. The Fed and the dollar are the weather. And the weather can soak you for a long, long time before the trend ever shows up on your doorstep. Being right and being early feel exactly the same while you are holding, and only one of them ever pays. That is not a reason to run. It is a reason to size it so you never have to. Because that was our foreman's real test. His gold did not glide from 35 to 800 in a clean line. Right in the middle of that great run, right when he had started to feel smart, it fell by roughly 40%. Nearly half of everything he had made, gone, over a stretch that felt endless, while the very inflation he had bet on kept raging, which made no sense to him at all. His brother-in-law told him, again, that he had been suckered. And this is the whole thing, the reason he is in this video and not somebody who sold. He held. Not because he was brave. He told his kids years later he was just too stubborn to sell at the bottom, and too careful from the start to have bought so much that a drawdown could ever force his hand. That is the difference between the people who were around at the end of that decade to see 35 become 800 and the people who were provably right and still got wiped out. The winners were not smarter. They were simply still standing. So here is what to actually do with your own position. And this is not advice. It is just how a calm person thinks it through. First, own the metal, not the promise. The whole gap between the people who survived that decade and the ones who got destroyed was whether they held the real thing or a leveraged paper claim that somebody else could yank away at the worst moment. Second, size it so a 40% drawdown cannot force you to sell. If a fall like the one the foreman lived through would make you liquidate at the bottom to cover a bill, your position is too big no matter how right the thesis is, because being forced to sell in the valley is how right people still lose everything. And third, do not sell into the shakeout. The shakeout is the machine that transfers metal from the people who feel to the people who own. Do not volunteer to be the fuel. If you are watching on your television, the QR code is on your screen one more time. If you are on your phone or your computer, go to jeffreedguide.com. It costs you nothing to be informed, and the honest reason to look now, and I do not trade in fake urgency, is simply this. The time to think a decision like this through calmly is exactly when nothing feels urgent, which is right now, not the day everyone is panicking and the choice is being made for you. And for those of you who stayed with me all the way to the end, here is something set aside just for you. If you have $100,000 or more in any retirement account, and you mention that you watched this full video, you can claim a free one-on-one, no-obligation educational web conference, a real conversation about what you actually own versus what you only think you own. No pressure, nothing to buy. That is for the folks at that level who made it all the way here, and you are one of them. So could this video sit under some other title? No. You came to find out whether a big year means silver is topping out or just getting started, and now you can answer it yourself, with your own hands. It is just getting started in the only sense that is honest, which is that the engine underneath it, the one that started running the night a president cut the dollar loose from gold and never tied it back, is still running. That is not a spike. A spike ends when the mood passes. This has not ended in more than 50 years. That does not promise you a price, and it does not promise you a smooth ride. It just tells you which of the two things you are holding. And that foreman, in his living room, watching a president call it temporary, he understood, before almost anyone, that temporary was the biggest word spoken that night. He did not get rich because he predicted a number. He got there because he saw a trend where everyone else saw the news, and then he set his life up so he could survive the middle of it. The move in silver may keep going and it may stall, and no honest person can tell you which. But the lesson of the man who actually lived the real thing is the one sure thing in this entire video. Do not just be right. Set yourself up so you are still standing to see it pay.